and Etruscans and the
Etruscans.
pardon?
Yes, yes.
Okay, the Etruscans and the founding of Rome. 2, the Roman Republic. 3, the Punic Wars.
The Punic Wars. Yep.
The Punic Wars. 4, the decline of the Republic. 5, the Roman Empire. 6, Roman society and culture. And 7, fall of the Roman Empire.
Good. Good. So these are basically the 7 chapters of this unit. Okay, the 7 chapters. Today's gonna be number 1, Etruscans and the founding of Rome. Okay. And if we take a look here on our timeline, on the other PowerPoint, if we put it on our timeline, it looks something like this. Okay, I mean, something like this. So you have the age of the Etruscans, what we also call it archaic Rome. And then you have the Roman Republic. See, a lot of people, when they think of Rome, they think of the empire, right? And that's fine. But before the empire, you had the Roman Republic. Okay. And so tomorrow we'll look at the rise and fall of the Republic and the civil wars, which then lead us into the Roman Empire. Starts with Augustus. And then, of course, the fall in 476 BC, and then we enter the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages or medieval times in around this period. This is our timeline. Of course, around here you have the birth of Jesus, and you have early Christianity, okay, in the 1st century AD, the first few centuries. And next, let's take a look at our geography of this peninsula. We call it a peninsula, right? Water on all 3 sides. So let's take a look at Italy in 750 BC. Italy in 750 BC. What are some of the groups here, KD? Who are we looking at here in the colors?
So the Etruria, which is the green. The Umbria, like the beige, I guess.
Okay.
Latium. Latium's kind of small.
Mm-hmm.
And Campania.
Yep, good.
And then that just makes up most of it. And that little bit at the bottom, the Carthage.
Carthage. Who are these people here in purple?
The purple. I don't know who those people are actually.
So remember we talked about the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were in modern day Lebanon. They were the ones that brought about the alphabet, right, to Western culture. This is basically the same civilization. Phoenicians are Carthaginians, and they're great traders, and they would move along the North African coast. Here.
So they were a bit in Sicily too, just a part of Sicily.
Yeah. So Rome and Carthage are going to come into major conflict. Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's what we called the Punic Wars. Remember when we go back up in the Punic Wars here?
Okay.
Yeah, which means basically it's a short for Phoenician. The Punic Wars were between Rome and this purple area here. Yeah, Carthage. So good. And look who we have in yellow, guys. We have the Greeks in yellow, right? This is the time of colonization. If you remember, we learned about colonization of the Greeks down here in yellow. Calabria, Sicily, and then Latium, which is the birth of Latin, right? I'm sure you've heard the language Latin. And the Etruscans up here in northern Italy in green. And the Gauls in modern day France, the Gauls, right? The barbarians to the north and the Germanic tribes to the north. The Romans would call them barbarians to the north.
Why were they called barbarians in the north?
We will get there. Yeah, we will get there. The Romans saw themselves as civilized, right? As Greek Hellenistic culture, civilized, right? And anybody who wasn't of that would be considered a barbarian to the Romans. But again, at this point in Roman history, it's still very early. Okay, the effects of Greece and Hellenism has not yet come upon them. So right now, the culture would be from this green part, the Etruscans, and that's who we're going to learn about. Okay, KD, keep reading, please.
Okay, so the geography of Rome, Romans called the Mediterranean Sea, and then it was Mare Nostrum, and that's meaning our sea.
Good. Mare Nostre, RC, yes. And resources in Italy.
So geography, resources in Italy, great economic possibilities, timber from the Apennines Mountains,
Yeah, the Apennine Mountains, yeah.
Apennines Mountains, stone and marble for building, iron and copper for industry, crops good harvest of wheat, barley, beans, and peas, green pastures for sheep, goats, and cattle, good vines for olives and grapes, most important.
Mm-hmm. For sure, olive oil and grapes and wine and sheep and goats. Okay, this peninsula is very rich in resources here, right?
Oh,
Especially with
okay.
their mild climate as well.
Sounds like geographical luck or something.
It is. It really is geographic luck, yes. Especially with the location. Italy is right in the middle of the Mediterranean. So for many groups, it was a strategic location. So everybody was here. I mean, at some point, Italy was taken over by foreign invaders throughout history.
Yeah, because they're surrounded by water, so doesn't that make them easy to attack?
Yep, yep. And I mean, you have Western Europe here, you have the East here, so you have Africa down here. So they're right in the middle. So it's a very strategic location where they are. Okay. So let me ask this question to you guys. What advantages did Rome's location give the city? What are some possible answers here? Yeah, just type your answers in. Type your answers. Good. Trade and protection. Yes. Good. We'll have Tina continue, please. Tina, summarize for me.
Okay, so what advantages did Rome's location give the city? Answer. It was protected by mountains. The sea provided protection and transportation. They had rich soil, pleasant climate, and it was located on a lot of major trade routes. The Tiber River provided easy access to the sea. The word port comes from the Roman name Portus, and the port at Ostia at the Tiber River.
Good. So the answer, protection. Yes, by mountains and sea. Good. Okay. Let me take a look at here. Here's the port, the Tiber River right here. Here's the Po River to the north, the two important rivers, Po and the Tiber River right here. And here's Portus in Rome, where we get the name port, right here. Good. Okay, some more about geography. Tina, can you continue, please?
Sure, sir. So, what were the geographic conditions of ancient Rome? How would this affect unity and political rule?
Good. Remember, so if we take a look at the mountains, you in Italy, you have the Apennine Mountains that run north and south, here that kind of divide the country in east and west. And then here in the north, you have the Alps. The Alps. This is a famous mountains, right, for skiing. So you have the Alps to the north, and you have the Apennines that run right through the middle of the country. So it really divides the country up. And that is why there are so many dialects in Italy. There's so many dialects because these people, although very similar in culture, spoke almost different languages. Okay, for example, my mom is from the south here in Calabria down here. My father is from Rome, and they can barely, in terms of their native tongue, they can barely speak to each other. My father can't understand my mother's language because just the dialect is so different, right? Because they did not travel because of geography for so long. So, and that is another reason why Italy took so long to unify, right? They did not unify until 1860s, 1870s, right? So, yeah, so geography is very important in this region here. Keep reading, Tina. Doing great.
So the geographic factors to the rise of Rome. So the link between Europe and Africa. Italian peninsula is central in the Mediterranean world, so it's halfway between east and west. Seclusion, so the rugged mountains separate northern Italy from the rest of Europe, which provides good protection but made communication difficult. The agricultural climate, so there was mild climate, fertile land, riverbeds, volcanic soil, and mountain deposits. The rivers, the Po and Tiger, allowed for transportation and created borders from other peoples.
Good. So you have a link between Europe and Africa. They're secluded, which is good for protection. They have excellent agriculture, okay, olives, grapes, etc., and the two important rivers. This should be a B. This should not say G. This should be a B. Tiber, okay, not tiger. Keep reading.
Rome was founded at a small settlement in Tiber River Valley, so that equals 7 hills of Palatine.
Yeah, these are the 7 famous hills, the Palatine Hills right here. When you go to ancient Rome, for those of you that have been there, or Rome, the Capitoline Hill, the Palatine Hill, okay, the Aventine Hill. This is like the beginning. This is the beginning of the city starting here. Here's the Forum. Yeah. If any of you visit Rome, you would know what I'm talking about here. 7 hills of Palatine. And then, have any of you seen this famous famous statue here, or of twins and a she wolf? Have you ever seen this before?
Yes, I've seen it in some art classes I've taken.
Yeah, so this is okay. Let's read about it, actually, Tina.
According to legend, the city of Rome began in 753 BCE with Romulus, who was the first of 7 Etruscan kings. Romulus was believed to be a great warrior king and started Rome's first army and government.
So the story of the twins, or the brothers, Romulus and Remus. This is the mythological, founding of Rome. Okay, yeah. So the story of how Rome was founded. Okay, which are the 2 brothers of Romulus. Yes, Alex, Romulus and Remus. Okay, and which would be the first of the Etruscan kings. In 753. This is our founding here. 753. Now let's watch this video here. Here's a she-wolf and the twins. This one.
Long ago, in the kingdom of Latium, the good king Numitor, known for his wisdom and generosity, was dethroned by his evil brother, Prince Amulius. At the same time, Amulius banished Numitor's daughter, the beautiful Princess Sylvia, to the temple of Mars, the god of war. There, thought Amulius, she would never have sons who might reclaim the throne. But his plan didn't work as expected. For Sylvia married Mars, and somewhat later, the couple had twin sons, whom they named Romulus and Remus. It did not take long for news of the twins' birth to reach Amulius, who immediately ordered 2 of his servants to kidnap the newborns and drown them in the Tiber River. That very night, the 2 men crept into the room where the twins lay sleeping, and once there, began to carry out their terrible mission. The next morning, the servants reported to Amulius that Romulus and Remus were dead. But in fact, they were not. The twins' cradle bobbed and dipped like a tiny boat in the rushing waters, but it did not overturn as expected, nor did it sink. Instead, the cradle eventually came to rest in a clump of rushes. After a while, the babies awakened and began to cry from cold and hunger. Now, as it happened, a she-wolf was nearby that morning and heard the newborns cry. She was furious and went to investigate. The animal was puzzled by these tiny humans, but she sensed their despair, and although she feared people, her motherly instincts overcame her, and she carried the 2 youngsters to her cave, where she reared them as her own. As the months passed, Romulus and Remus grew strong and healthy, and in time they began to venture out farther and farther from their cave. One day, a shepherd named Faustulus noticed the boys as they chased each other down a path. The shepherd was struck by their curious clothing and their wolf-like gait. He followed them to their cave and was, to say the very least, astonished at what he saw. Now Faustulus and his wife were childless, so later that night, while the wolves slept, he came to take the youngsters to his home. For many years, Faustulus and his wife took care of the twins as if they were their own sons, although at first the boys found it difficult to eat as humans. In time, Romulus and Remus grew strong and handsome. Even so, they never completely lost all their wild, wolf-like ways. They helped Faustulus with his herding. And when they weren't in the pastures, the twins took to ambushing thieves who had stolen livestock and food. Then they returned the stolen goods to their rightful owners. Over the years, stories of the twins' brave deeds spread far and wide, until, one day, reports of their exploits reached their grandfather Numitor, who, banished to the far northern reaches of the kingdom, had led a lonely life for many years. The old man wanted to meet the brave young heroes, and so he asked his guards to find the twins and bring them back. As soon as he saw them, Numitor was struck by their resemblance to his daughter Sylvia. And when Romulus and Remus told him their story, he realized what had happened.
You are my grandsons. My daughter, the Princess Sylvia, is your mother. Your wicked Uncle Amulius tried to kill you and has stolen your birthright. Now that you know these things, you must take the throne for me so that one day it can be yours.
When the 2 brothers returned home, they began to plan how they would accomplish this task. First, they decided to recruit as soldiers all whom they had helped over the years. Then, their army would attack Amulius and his forces as they slept. Finally, they would take their army to the Temple of Mars to rescue their mother. And because Romulus and Remus were cunning and brave, their plan worked. Sylvia returned to the castle, and Numitor regained his throne. To commemorate their victory, the twins decided to build a great city on the banks of the Tiber River, where the she-wolf had found them. Romulus designed the streets and houses, Remus the temples and baths. And, in time, a magnificent city blanketed the 7 hills that stood near the river. But what was it to be called? Remus said it should be called Rem, because he had designed the temples. Romulus wanted the city to be named Rome, because he had designed the houses. And because both brothers retained the wildness of their early upbringing, they began to fight savagely. So savagely, in fact, that the fight ended only when Remus lay dead. And so, Rome was given its name. In time, Romulus became king of the city named after him, and ruled wisely and compassionately for many years. Because he had done so many good and noble things, the gods looked favorably upon him. And so, when he died, he was taken to where the gods dwelled. From that time on, he was called Quirinus, and became a noble god of war.
All right, that is the story of Romulus and Remus. Okay. And thus, Rome was born in 753, and Romulus is the first of 7 Etruscan kings. Okay. Okay. So now let's read about the Etruscans. Okay, so now we know about the birth of Rome. It's roughly 750 BC. Now let's learn more about these people to the north of Rome called the Etruscan. The Etruscans. Dina. How about Dina? Are you ready? Are you with us, Dina?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Oh. All right.
First inhabitants of northern Italy, c. 750 BCE, conquered Rome around 600 BCE, skilled artisans, farmers, and accomplished traders. In Rome, the Etruscans dug an enormous ditch, great sewer, to create a drained area named the Forum, contributed to the rise of Roman culture.
The Etruscan monarchy. Continue, Dina. Nice and loud.
First Etruscan king was Romulus. Etruscus expanded power and took control over Rome. Last Etruscan king was Tarquin the Proud, expelled by a popular rebellion in 509 BCE due to a scandal and his terrorizing reign. Romans did not want to be ruled by kings anymore, paved way for Rome to create a democratic republic. Etruscan influence on Romans alphabet, arch, numerals, blood sports, politics, purple robes, and symbol of fascists.
Good. So let's go back up to our timeline. And of course, you see here, so basically the Etruscans did not last for too long. It was roughly 753 till about till 509, right? Tarquin the Proud is the last king to be deposed. And then we enter the Republic. Okay, so between 753 and 509 BC, we have the Archaic Age. That would be the Etruscan monarchy. But then we enter the Roman Republic. Okay, and that will bring us all the way up until roughly 27 BC. So that's the Roman Republic is going to last for almost 500 years. Okay, so very, very important. Okay, is where we're starting here with the Etruscans. So like you said, Romulus was the first. The last Etruscan king was Tarquin the Proud. You're going to read a little bit about him and 509. And that would pave the way for the famous Roman Republic. Not the empire, but the Republic. What are we looking at right here, guys? What is this called? Some of you might have been there. What do we call this?
Wait, sir, is that the stadium thing in the back in Rome? I don't know what it's called.
The Circus Maximus? What are you referring to?
Oh, like that circle back there, like the gray building, kind of.
Oh, the Colosseum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, the Colosseum is there. Yes, but what are we looking at here? No, the Colosseum is in the background, but what's here? This is called something. The Roman what? Good, David. The Roman Forum. And what happens at the Forum? Read, David. Yes, good job. Read. Good job. The heart of Rome was the Roman Forum. So let me go back to this one here. So therefore, we learned about the mythical founding of Rome, right? The famous story of Romulus and Remus, and the she-wolf, and the shepherd Faustulus. Now, when we talk about now the Etruscans and their influence, David, what was the legacy of the Etruscan people by 509? The arch, right? The arch and buildings. You see that all over Rome. Sewers, the great sewers, gladiator games, all started here. Keep reading, please. If we see modern influences of the Etruscans. And where have we seen this before, David? Where have we seen something like this that would come up in the 20th century? Okay. I see where you're going.
Sir,
Nathan?
is it in the what was it, the Italian Fascist Party?
Yes, with Benito Mussolini. Yes, right. He used this same symbol, right? Trying to bring back what he used to call the Roman Empire, right? This is what he referred to, the Etruscan bundle, right? Like a bundle of wheat, bringing the country together. So this would actually be used in the 20th century, right? This origin from this ancient technique of ruling. Strength and unity. Yep.
Sir, was that wheat in the middle of it?
No, no. This is sticks, but in some cases it would be wheat would be used as well. Yeah. But the idea is to unify, right? Is to unify the country, especially a country like this one, which was so divided, right? It was so divided. And in many ways, when he took power in 1922, his mission was to unify the country. And
So like you know that the Soviet Union had a flag with an axe and a wreath.
Oh.
Is that not related?
You're talking about the hammer and sickle? Is that what
Yeah.
you're referring to, like the workers' revolution type of symbol? Yeah. Different, but yeah. But I mean, saying the idea is unity, right? The idea is definitely strength and unity. Yeah. You can see the Etruscan influence has been great or significant, right? Even in modern history. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'd like to go through one of these videos here just to really take you now into the timeline of ancient Rome. This is really going to be helpful for you going forward. Okay, so let's just watch. It's about 8 minutes. Okay.
When you hear of ancient Rome or the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, immediately images of the Roman legions come to mind, these conquering armies conquering much of the Mediterranean. You might have images of the Roman Senate. Names like Julius Caesar and Augustus might come to mind. You might think of some of the famous architecture, some of which you can still see if you were to visit Rome. And these are all real images of Rome, or they're appropriately associated with it. And we'll talk about most of these things in some depth. But Rome did not start out that way. And the purpose of this video is to give us an overarching arc of the history of Rome, to be able to place it within history, both in terms of time and geography. So just to make sure we can read what I did here ahead of time, is I have up here a high level timeline. And then down here, I have a timeline that zooms in a little bit, goes into a few more details. And you can see this timeline on top. It's going from the 8th century BCE all the way to the 5th century CE. So it's covering over 1,000 years of history. And I needed it to cover over 1,000 years of history because the Roman Empire, right, we could even say just the Western Roman Empire, covers that much. And that doesn't even cover the entire legacy of the Roman Empire, because when we get into the 4th century CE, you have a split where you have the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire, and the Eastern, often known as the Byzantine Empire, that goes on until 1453 CE. So another 1,000 years until they are conquered by the Ottomans. So the legacy of the Roman Empire, even formally as an empire, is significant. And then it continues on. Much of Western civilization, especially Europe and the Mediterranean, has its foundations in the Roman Empire, and then before that, Greek civilization. And the Roman Empire is really up there alongside the Persian Empire as one of the really great civilizations or empires. And when I say great, you should take that with a grain of salt. Great, I'm saying it was big, it was powerful, but not everything they did was great. They had a lot of slavery, they were very cruel, they were sometimes very violent. So take these terms great with a grain of salt. So now that we get this timeline up here, and then down here, I'm going to go, whoops, down here, I have some maps that are going to show how the Roman Empire grew and then eventually splits and declines. But as we go to this top timeline, we see the founding of Rome in the 8th century BCE. And this date, 753, is the date that's often given to the founding of Rome by Romulus, one of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, raised by a she-wolf. They were abandoned and raised by the she-wolf, as legend would have it. And then Romulus eventually kills his brother and then becomes the first king of Rome. We don't know how much of this is true. I suspect a lot of this is very legendary. A legend would have it that Rome is named for Romulus. But some historians today think, well, it might have been the other way around. We have the city of Rome. They needed a founding story. Hey, let's say this person Romulus started it. And we don't know the exact date, but there seems to be a reasonable consensus that around this, mid 8th century BCE, you have the founding of the city of Rome. But it's important to realize that at that point, this is the founding of the city, the kingdom of Rome, it wasn't a significant power on the Italian peninsula at the time. Where I have this X marked, that's where Rome is. And what you see in green, this is actually the Etruscan civilization. And for most of this period of the Roman kingdom, so this period right over here, it's actually the Etruscans that are dominant power. And for significant fractions of this, they were dominant over the Roman kingdom, over the city of Rome. But as we get to 509 BCE, this is when the Roman Republic is established. And in this blue-green color, this is the kingdom. The gold color, this yellow color is the republic. And then the red color is when the empire gets established by Julius Caesar and his adopted son, Augustus. And as we get into this, I guess you could say this republic period or into the Roman Republic, this is when it starts to really exert itself as more of a dominant influence in the region. And it continues to be a dominant influence in the region for several hundred years. And then as we get into the first several hundred years in the Common Era, so after the time of Jesus, as we get into the 200s, the 300s, this is when we start to see a real decline of the Roman Empire, and the Western Empire at least, gets sacked multiple times in the 5th century. And the year 476 is what's typically given for the end of the Roman Empire. But even that's not exactly the end of the Roman Empire, because in the 4th century, you have the Roman Empire splitting into this Eastern and Western empires. And the Eastern later gets known as the Byzantine Empire. That goes on for another 1,000 years until it's, as I mentioned, I think earlier, taken over by the Ottomans. But to get more of appreciation for how the Roman Empire grew and then eventually starts to shrink, I have some maps over here. So this first map, this is roughly from the 3rd century BCE. And 3rd century BCE, you might remember, Rome is a republic at this time, but it's not the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Just to give ourselves some bearings, you might remember that in the late 4th century BCE, that's when Alexander conquers much of or most of Greece, Macedonia, the Persian Empire, which included at the time Egypt. And as we get into the 3rd century BCE, you still have the fragments of Alexander's empire, that these are still significant powers in the region. You also have the Carthaginian Empire, which you see here in blue in North Africa and southern Spain. And this period, you have a series of wars between the Romans and the Carthaginians, known as the Punic Wars. And we'll do videos in depth on the Punic Wars. They're called the Punic Wars because the term Punic, it comes from what the Romans called the Phoenicians. And Carthage was actually founded by ancient Phoenicians. So you could kind of consider this the Phoenician War or the descendants of the Phoenician Wars. But that's why it's called Punic. But the Romans eventually win the multiple rounds of Punic Wars, take over their territory, and eventually destroy Carthage. Carthage is destroyed in 146 BCE, and we'll talk about that in more detail. Now, as we go into the 1st century BCE, this is when Rome goes from being a republic to an empire. And it happens when the general, Julius Caesar, he's able to conquer Gaul for the Roman Republic. So Gaul is modern day France and some other surrounding regions. And he is so powerful that when he comes back to Rome, a civil war ensues. And Julius Caesar is able to essentially win the civil war, declare himself the dictator. And then his adopted son, Augustus, right over here, is in 27 BCE declared emperor. And that's the beginning of the Roman Empire. And we keep going, and I think I've already mentioned it once in this video, but eventually we get a split in the 4th century CE, where we have eastern and western halves of the Roman Empire. The western side centered at Rome, the eastern side centered at what was originally Byzantium, renamed Constantinople, and today Istanbul. And as we get into the 5th century, that's when the Western Empire especially starts to really go into decline and is eventually sacked in 476. But the Eastern Empire keeps on going.
Okay, It's just a great overview there. I hope that helps. I hope we understand kind of the what's happening here in ancient Rome. I mean, ancient Rome covers almost 1,000 years, roughly 750 BC to 476 AD. So that's a long time. That's a very, very long time. Okay. So if you take a look again, this is what we're going to be covering this unit, this timeline. Tomorrow, I think we can move on and start with the Republic. Okay. Right. And before I finish up, let me go through the rest of my PowerPoint. It's just a few pictures. So we have the Etruscan influence. Again, we're going to learn about the 12 tables in 450, okay, which is the first kind of type of writing or tablet that provides rights for the lower class, which they were called the plebeians. The patricians, which you'll learn, are the wealthy, and the plebeians are the lower peasantry class. Okay. It's the 12 tables. You have the Roman Forum. You have the Roman roads, Appian Way. Again, the Romans were able to create concrete. Here's Roman aqueducts to bring in water into the city. Aqueducts. We'll learn about this when we get into Roman architecture. You can see the arches coming from the Etruscan, the arches. Okay, and some leaders and dictators we'll learn about. I'm sure you heard about the Ide of March, which means the middle of March, March 15, 44, and 44 BC. And which leads us to the first emperor of Rome, Octavian Augustus. And then what's called Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. Roman peace, okay, for almost 200 years. Roman peace, Pax Romana, peace and stability to last for 200 years. Colosseum. And when we think about the empire at its greatest extent was roughly 14 CE. That's when we look at its greatest extent into Britain. This is how big it once was. Something that just started out with the little Etruscans and little Rome got to be this big. So lots to cover. That's going to be it for me for my teaching today. So again, go back and review the PowerPoints for today's lesson, which is the Etruscans and founding of Rome. Okay, you can go back and take notes. And what you can work on now is this worksheet right here, geography questions. You click this. I have 5 geography questions. Sorry, 6. And then I have just a very short reading in your textbooks and questions 1 to 3. Okay, so you're just going to work on this sheet. So that's total 9 questions. You can see I posted the textbook right here. You see it, it's right here. Okay, so just a few pages you have to read. And then these are the reflection questions right here. So I'd like everybody right now to take 20 minutes, which is probably what it'll take you, and start reading here, pages 165 to 168. You're going to read, and then you're going to answer these questions. But you have to read first. Okay.